Our first award of the evening is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Award. It is presented to a nominee who emulates Dr. King in leadership and philosophy, and who opens the pathways of hope to Americans of all races and groups. This year's recipient is from North Carolina.
Hi, I'm Rodney Ellis, President of the North Carolina Association of Educators. The recipient of this award has covered every corner of the state, fighting for students, the poor, and voting rights for every citizen. His march for social justice is endless, yet his feet never grow weary. Reverend Dr. William Barber.
Though the decades march on, the dream lives.
We are here, assembled for hope.
Courage and commitment, continued by torchbearers like Reverend Dr. William Barber II, pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church in Goldsboro and president of the North Carolina NAACP. He stands by his convictions, even with the threat of getting arrested. Barber and hundreds of protesters were taken into custody after a series of spring protests this year. The Moral Monday events demonstrate a classic David versus Goliath struggle. The Reverend taking on a right-leaning state legislature that has introduced an avalanche of extreme policies that hurt students, the poor, and the sick.
You try to turn us backwards rather than go forward. We do what? We fight, we fight, we fight.
Years ago, Barber also made headlines for his arrest at the Wake County School Board. Determined not to turn back the clock to the days of Jim Crow, he fought an effort to resegregate county schools.
Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Look.
In addition to speaking up, he's also building up the Goldsboro community. Reverend Dr. Barber is the chairperson of the Rebuilding Broken Places Community Development Corporation. The facility provides on-site job training, childcare and meals for children, and tutoring. The corporation also offers home buying workshops and built homes for first-time home buyers and low-income families.
Forward together!
You'll often find Barber at the state capitol in Raleigh. This day, he's leading hundreds from a local church to the State House for a legislative lobby day.
In every generation, for a time such as this, God raises up a prophetic voice, and Reverend Barber is that prophetic voice in our midst right now.
The event is part of an effort the Reverend started in 2006 called Historical Thousands on Jones Street, or HK on J. 140 partnering organizations make up the coalition that works to advance social justice in North Carolina.
I think that he's been able to bring, different groups together, working class people in general, people from different socioeconomic statuses.
Hello, Ms. Barber. We think it's time for legislators to stop being ideologues, Republicans, Democrats. Think about these people.
HK on J's signature event is held each year in February. In just 5 years, participation has swelled from 3,500 to more than 15,000, all standing behind a man who is willing to fight until the cause is won.
That when it comes to our rights, ordained by God, guaranteed by the Constitution, we will never, never, never turn back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II.
Wow. Let me first tonight give honor to God and special thanks to Dennis Van Rocco, the president of the NEA, to Chair Kevin Gilbert, and to my good friend and all my colleagues from North Carolina and our president, Rodney Ellis. Awards like this do not pay tribute to one person, but to the movement that day in and day out continues to fight for the education and justice for all. It is the combined we that makes movements possible. And so on tonight, I will accept this award on behalf of all of our NAACP branches in North Carolina and our coalition partners, and I will promise tonight to keep working with all of you to fulfill the promises of our deepest and most sacred moral and constitutional values when it comes to education. As I stand here tonight, I cannot help but be reminded that the fight for children, educators, and public education must be at the center of any movement that seeks to better our nation. 145 years ago, Reverend J.W. Hood, a black preacher, and Samuel Ashley, a white cleric, demanded that public education be a constitutional right in North Carolina if North Carolina was going to move away from the ugly vestiges of slavery and discrimination, because they knew then what we must know now. The fight for children and educators and public education must be at the center of any movement that will change the nation. At the turn of the century, Carter G. Woodson understood the damage and danger of miseducation, and he knew the fight for children and educators and public education must be at the center of any movement that seeks to better our nation. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., for whom this award is named, the leader and moral voice of the civil rights movement, he knew, he fought for public education. He fought to make sure Brown versus Board of Education was fulfilled, because he knew the fight for children, educators, and public education must be at the center of any movement that seeks to better our nation. When my parents, if I could take a personal moment, who lived in the Midwest, outside of the reaches of Jim Crow in the 60s, decided to come back to the South, enter me into segregated public schools so that they could be on the front line as soldiers in the fight to desegregate the South and open up public education as demanded by the 1954 Brown decision. My mother, who still works at the school she desegregated, she's 80 years old now. My father, who's gone on to glory, they knew the fight for children and educators and public education must be at the center of any movement that seeks to better our nation. And today, the fight for quality education is in the top 5 game changers of the NAACP, because we know this fight must continue. And in North Carolina, we have built a modern fusion movement with an anti-racism, anti-poverty focus with the 100 branches of the NAACP and 150 coalition partners, including the NEA. For the last 9 Mondays straight, we have seen thousands challenge the extremists in our state capitol. More than 7, as of last night, 84 persons, black, white, Latino, young, old, teachers, and students submitted themselves to arrest, now making the total more than 700, demanding that every child have their access to a constitutional, well-funded, diverse, high-quality public education. And we are demanding that our public educators be paid and respected, because we know that if this nation is to ever fulfill its hope of being more perfect, and if the South particularly will ever be delivered from the vestiges of inequality, the fight for public education must go on. And so, Mr. President, I took a break here tonight. It took me a plane with mechanical errors and being put on the wrong plane. We took a break to come here, but tomorrow morning at 8:55, we go back to the fight, because it must be a fight. It must be a fight true to our moral values and true to our constitutional hope. It must be a fight not a mere debate between Republicans and Democrats. It must be a fight, not a mere discussion about who's liberal and who's conservative, but it must be a fight in the courts, a fight in the streets, and a fight at the ballot box. We must raise our hands. We must stand strong. We must fight. We must fight for our children and fight for educators and fight for the soul of this nation. And if we do it in our time, the day will come when our children will holler our name and history will record our acts, because while we had breath in our body and were clothed in our right mind, we did not give up the fight. God bless you.